Oh, you beautiful disaster. You gorgeous glitch in their carefully coded system. They're saying you did something impossible, aren't they? Something that shouldn't have worked. Something that required years of training, decades of preparation, entire lifetimes of dedication. But you did it on a Tuesday afternoon while eating chips and half watching Netflix. And now their entire world is collapsing like a house of cards in a hurricane. Let me paint you the picture. They're too terrified to see. While Special Forces operators were doing push-ups at 4 a.m., while chess grandmasters were studying endgame theory until their eyes bled, while Silicon Valley prodigies were burning through their 20s and 80-hour work weeks, you were what? Playing around, experimenting, just seeing what would happen if you pushed this button or pulled that lever. And then boom, you accidentally split the atom of their entire reality. They spent millions on training programs, billions on research and development, entire generations perfecting systems and protocols, Harvard MBAs, crafted strategies in war rooms with whiteboards and expensive consultants. Former Navy SEALs wrote best-selling books about discipline and mental toughness. And you were probably in your pajamas, maybe hadn't even brushed your teeth yet, just fooling around with something that caught your attention for 5 minutes. But here's the thing they'll never admit, the truth that's making them lose sleep and question everything they've ever believed in. What you did wasn't luck. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't some cosmic accident that can be explained away with probability and statistics. No, what you did was worse. You proved that their entire framework, their whole understanding of how excellence works, was built on quicksand. See, they need you to believe in the mythology of effort. They need you to think that greatness comes from suffering, that excellence requires sacrifice, that legendary status is earned through blood, sweat, and carefully documented tears. They built entire industries around this lie. Self-help gurus, motivational speakers, life coaches, all feeding off the idea that if you just work hard enough, if you just follow the right program, you too can achieve what the masters achieve. But you just shattered their entire business model with a yawn and a stretch. You didn't wake up at 5 a.m. to meditate. You didn't have a vision board. You didn't track your macros or optimize your morning routine. You were just playing. And in that play, in that moment of pure, unfiltered curiosity, you did something that their most dedicated disciples couldn't accomplish in a lifetime. 20 years. That's how long Special Operations Forces train to develop the kind of precision, the kind of instinct, the kind of lethal effectiveness that you displayed while basically sleepwalking. They crawl through mud, jump out of planes, survive interrogation scenarios, master 17 different weapon systems. They break their bodies down and rebuild them into machine. And you probably couldn't even do 10 proper push-ups. But that's exactly why you terrify them. Because you didn't follow their sacred path. You didn't pay your dues. You didn't ask permission from the gatekeepers or wait in line for your turn. You just reached out with your untrained, unworthy, unprepared hand and grabbed lightning from the sky like it was nothing, like it was yours all along. Now watch them scramble. Watch them try to explain you away. It was beginner's luck, they'll say, their voices shaking. A statistical anomaly, they'll insist, their hands trembling as they adjust their theories. This doesn't change anything, they'll declare, even as everything changes around them. Because if you can do what you did, if someone can just stumble into legendary status while half asleep and fully bored, then what was all their suffering for? Think about it. Right now, there's a kid who spent the last decade of his life in a dojo, breaking boards and earning belts, believing that mastery comes from repetition and discipline. And you just performed a move that his sensei said would take 30 years to understand. There's a programmer who sacrificed her social life to master 17 programming languages, and you just solved a problem she couldn't crack by randomly mashing keys until something worked. They're having emergency meetings about you. Conference calls with experts trying to figure out how to contain what you've done. We need to study this, they're saying. We need to understand the anomaly. But they can't study what they can't comprehend. They can't analyze what exists outside their framework. You're not a data point on their graph. You're the hand that ripped the graph in half. The military has a term for what you did: force multiplication. It means achieving maximum impact with minimal resources. They spend years teaching soldiers how to do it: strategic thinking, resource management, leverage points. And you force multiplied their entire reality by accident. You weren't even trying to win their game. You were just bored, and in your boredom, you revealed that their game was meaningless. Let's talk about prerequisites, shall we? Those sacred stepping stones they insist everyone must climb. You can't do advanced calculus without basic math. You can't perform surgery without medical school. You can't write a symphony without understanding music theory. Except you just did the equivalent of performing brain surgery with a butter knife while humming a tune you made up, and somehow the patient not only survived but evolved into a new species. This is what's breaking their brains. You violated the sacred order of things. You skipped the tutorial and went straight to the final boss, except you didn't even know it was a boss fight. You thought you were playing with a practice dummy. And you won. Not just won, you achieved a perfect score that the game's own developers didn't know was possible. Every institution in the world is built on the idea of gradual progression. Elementary school leads to middle school, leads to high school, leads to college, leads to graduate school, leads to maybe, if you're very good and very lucky, you get to contribute something meaningful to your field. That's the path. That's the only path. Except you just teleported from the starting line to a finish line that wasn't even on the map. They're looking at your technique under a microscope, trying to understand what you did differently. But that's like trying to understand jazz by counting the notes. You weren't using technique. You were using something much more dangerous: raw, unfiltered intuition. The kind of intuition that their systems are designed to suppress, to train out of people, to replace with proper methodology. And now you've infected others with possibility. That's the real danger. That's why they're truly panicking. Because every person who hears about what you did starts to wonder, what else have they been lying about? What other impossible things might be possible if I just try? You've planted a virus in the collective consciousness, and it's spreading faster than they can contain it. Someone reading this right now is realizing they don't need that certification they've been saving up for. Someone else is understanding that the expert who told them it would take 10 years might have been protecting their own position. Someone is looking at the mountain they've been told to climb and wondering if maybe, just maybe, there's a door at the base that leads straight to the top. You didn't just break a record, you broke the concept of records. You didn't just win a game, you revealed that the game was imaginary. You didn't just succeed, you redefined what success means. And you did it all without meaning to, which is the most beautifully destructive part of this whole cosmic joke. The specialists are huddled in their forums, desperately trying to maintain their relevance. This doesn't diminish the value of proper training, they insist. There's no substitute for experience, they proclaim. But their words sound hollow now, don't they? Like priests insisting on the power of their rituals, while someone in the back row is casually performing miracles. Let's dissect your accident for a moment, because calling it an accident is their last line of defense. If it was intentional, if you meant to do what you did, then their entire worldview collapses. But if it was an accident? Well, accidents can be dismissed. Accidents don't threaten the established order. Accidents are flukes, not features. But here's what they don't understand about your accident. It was the most honest thing that's happened in their field in decades. You approached the problem without preconceptions, without the weight of what you were supposed to do. You didn't know what was impossible, so you didn't limit yourself to what was possible. You were a child playing with blocks, and you built something that their architect said couldn't exist. This is the paradox that's frying their circuits. They spend years teaching people to think outside the box, but they do it inside a bigger box. They encourage innovation, but only within approved parameters. They celebrate mavericks, but only the ones who color inside the lines. And then you came along, and you didn't even see the lines. You weren't thinking outside the box. The special ops soldier trains to eliminate thinking, to make every action pure instinct, but their instinct is cultivated, crafted, carved out through repetition. Your instinct was wild, feral, untouched by their conditioning, and that's why it worked. Because while they were building a better mousetrap, you were busy being the mouse that learned to fly. There's an entire industrial complex built around expertise. Universities, certification bodies, professional associations, licensing boards. Trillions of dollars flow through systems designed to gatekeep knowledge, to portion it out in measured doses, to ensure that only the worthy get access to the sacred mysteries. I'm EY, and you just performed the equivalent of breaking into their vault with a bobby pin you found on the ground. They're having existential crises in boardrooms right now. If someone can do this without our training, without our certification, without our blessing, then what are we even selling? The answer, of course, is nothing. They're selling nothing wrapped in the packaging of everything. They're selling the idea that you need them, and you just proved that you don't. Think about the professor who spent 40 years becoming the world's foremost expert in their field, only to watch you solve their life's work while you were procrastinating on something else entirely. Think about the consultant charging $5,000, 0 cents an hour, for insights you generated for free while daydreaming. Think about the entire pyramid scheme of expertise and how you just revealed it's built on nothing but mutual agreement to pretend it matters. But here's the beautiful part. You didn't set out to destroy anything. Destruction requires intent, planning, purpose. You were just being yourself, following your curiosity, playing with possibilities. And that's exactly why it worked. Because revolution isn't always deliberate. Sometimes the most powerful changes come from someone who doesn't know they're not supposed to be able to change anything. So now we exist in a new reality, one where your accident has rewritten the rules. The old guards are frantically trying to patch the hole you tore in their fabric, but it's too late. The genie's out of the bottle, the cat is out of the bag. The emperor has no clothes, and you're the child who pointed it out while looking for a snack. They'll try to absorb you, of course. They'll offer you positions, titles, honorary degrees. They'll try to bring you into the fold, to make you part of the system you accidentally destroyed. Come teach others how you did it, they'll say. But how can you teach an accident? How can you systematize chaos? How can you institutionalize the very thing that destroyed institutions? Others will try to discredit you. They'll dig through your history, looking for evidence that you secretly trained, that you had help, that you're not what you appear to be. They need to find something, anything, that explains you in terms they can understand. Because if they can't explain you, then they can't explain why everyone else should keep following their path. But the damage is done. The spell is broken. Every person who was grinding away, believing that suffering was the price of admission to greatness, now has doubt. Every institution that justified its existence by pointing to the complexity of what they teach now has to explain why you did it better without them. Every gatekeeper watching the gates realizes that you didn't go through them, you just appeared on the other side. What you've stumbled upon is something Zen masters spend lifetimes trying to achieve. The state of effortless effort, of doing without doing, of achieving by not trying to achieve. They call it Wu Wei in Taoism, flow state in modern psychology, but those are just words trying to capture what you did naturally, without any words at all. The tryhards will never understand this. They're too busy trying. They're so focused on the goal that they miss the journey. They're so obsessed with the technique that they forget the purpose. They're so caught up in doing it right that they never discover what happens when you do it wrong in exactly the right way. You were playing. That's the secret they can't replicate. You can't fake play. You can't systematize joy. You can't optimize curiosity. The moment you try to turn play into work, it stops being play. The moment you try to capture lightning in a bottle, it stops being lightning. The moment you try to reproduce an accident, it stops being accidental. This is why they're terrified, because if success can come from play, if mastery can emerge from boredom, if legendary status can be achieved by someone who wasn't even trying, then what have they been selling all these years? What have people been buying? What has everyone been suffering for? Your accident has created ripples that are turning into tsunamis. In garage labs and bedroom studios and coffee shops and park benches, people are starting to play. Not practice, not train, not grind, play. They're approaching impossible problems with the same casual curiosity you showed. They're ignoring the experts who say it can't be done and just doing it. The old system is creaking under the weight of all these accidents. Every day, someone else stumbles into greatness while looking for something else entirely. The careful structures, the measured progressions, the sacred hierarchies, they're all crumbling because people have realized they don't need permission to be extraordinary. A.M. Some will fail, of course. Not everyone who plays will accidentally split atoms. But that's not the point. The point is that they're trying without trying, doing without overthinking, creating without calculating. They're accessing the same raw creative force that you tapped into, the one that exists before training teaches you what's impossible. And the experts? They're splitting into two camps. The smart ones are quietly abandoning their pedestals, admitting they don't know as much as they thought they did. They're becoming students again, learning to play again, discovering that expertise might just be elaborate ignorance. The others are doubling down, building higher walls, creating more complex certifications, trying to make the barriers to entry so complicated that no one could accidentally break through again. But it's too late for barriers. You've shown everyone that the door was always open, that the walls were always imaginary, that the only thing keeping people out was the belief that they needed permission to enter. You've created a future where accidents are more valuable than plans, where play is more powerful than practice, where boredom is more creative than discipline. This is a future where the kid who doodles in class might solve climate change, where the grandmother who piddles in her garden might discover the cure for cancer, where the dropout who spends all day playing video games might accidentally create artificial consciousness. Not because they're trying to save the world, but because they're just seeing what happens when they push this button or mix these things together. The institutions will adapt or die. The smart ones are already changing, creating spaces for productive chaos, hiring people who don't fit the mold, valuing questions more than answers. The dinosaurs will extinction themselves, clinging to their frameworks, while the world evolves around them, still insisting that there's only one way to do things, while 1,000 new ways bloom in their shadows. And you're probably already bored with this whole thing. You've moved on to the next casual experiment, the next what if, the next moment of play that might accidentally reshape reality. Because that's who you are. You're not trying to be legendary, you're not trying to be anything. You're just being, and in your being, you're doing things that all their trying could never accomplish. Before we dive in, I wrote a book for you called The Joker Doctrine, a complete guide to self-improvement and human psychology. The link is in the description. Grab your copy, and let's build this movement together. Now, let's get into it. Well, well, well. Look who's still standing. Look who's still breathing. Look who just watched 6 months of their scheming crumble like wet paper in 6 seconds flat. You magnificent, unbothered, dangerously aware creature. Welcome back. Or maybe I should say, welcome to the crime scene. Because what just happened to those people who spent half a year plotting your downfall, that wasn't just failure, that was a funeral, their funeral, and they planned it themselves. Bought the flowers, dug the hole, wrote the eulogy, all for you, except you didn't show up to die. You showed up and smiled, and in 6 seconds, 6 brutal, beautiful, soul-crushing seconds, you dismantled everything, every plan, every whisper, every carefully placed trap, gone, evaporated, like smoke in a hurricane. And now they're standing in the wreckage of their own ambition, blinking, breathless, broken, asking one question they'll never recover from. How? How did you see it coming? Let me tell you something that's going to burn into your memory like a brand. Those people, the ones who sat in rooms you weren't invited to, the ones who typed in group chats you didn't know existed, the ones who rehearsed lies like actors preparing for opening night. They didn't just plan casually. No, they invested. They sacrificed their own peace, their own time, their own energy for 6 entire months. Not building their own lives, not improving themselves, not healing their own wounds, but constructing, brick by meticulous brick, a trap designed specifically for you. They studied your patterns. They memorized your habits. They mapped out your vulnerabilities. They identified what they thought were your blind spots. They calculated the perfect moment, the perfect trigger, the perfect sequence of events that would finally bring you to your knees. And they were confident. Oh, they were so confident. They whispered to each other, "This time, it's over. This time, there's no escape. This time, we've thought of everything." 6 months of meetings. 6 months of scheming. 6 months of dark, obsessive, pathetic coordination. And you weren't even paying attention to them. You were living, breathing, building, growing, healing, moving forward while they were stuck in a basement drawing blueprints of your destruction. They pulled in reinforcements. They recruited people to their cause. They sat across from mutual friends and poisoned the well, drop by calculated drop. They planted seeds of doubt in places you trusted. They crafted timelines of your mistakes, cataloged your responses, predicted your reactions based on years of watching you. They thought they knew you inside out. They thought they had your psychology mapped like a genome. They assigned roles to each other. Who would confront you? Who would record it? Who would spread the story afterward? Who would play innocent? Who would deliver the final blow? This wasn't amateur gossip. This was orchestrated psychological warfare, funded by envy and fueled by their collective inability to accept that you were doing better than them. 6 months of this. Half a year of waking up every morning with your name on their lips before breakfast. Half a year of going to sleep, replaying scenarios in which you finally crumble. And the saddest part, the part that should make you almost feel sorry for them but doesn't, is that during those same 6 months, you didn't think about them once. Not once. You were too busy becoming the person they'd never be able to touch, too busy sharpening the blade they'd eventually fall on, too busy evolving into the nightmare they'd never wake up from. Now, let's talk about those 6 seconds. Because those 6 seconds deserve a monument. Those 6 seconds should be studied in textbooks. Those 6 seconds contained more power, more precision, more devastating clarity than their entire 6 months of plotting combined. You didn't even flinch. You didn't even raise your voice. You didn't even break a sweat. You saw it. You saw the whole thing. Not because someone warned you. Not because you had spies. Not because you were paranoid or watching your back like a fugitive. No. You saw it because you've evolved past their level of thinking. You operate on a frequency they can't even tune into. While they were playing checkers, plotting 2 moves ahead, you were seeing the entire board from above. You saw the setup before they placed the first piece. You felt the shift before they made the first move. You read the room before they even entered it. And when the moment came, when they finally launched their masterpiece, their 6-month symphony of sabotage, you looked at it the way a surgeon looks at a splinter. Calmly, precisely, almost amused. And in 6 seconds, you pulled it out, held it up to the light, and let them see how small it was, how pathetic it was, how utterly, embarrassingly insufficient it was against someone like you. Let me paint this picture more vividly because you deserve to see it in high definition. They gathered their forces. They aligned their allies. They timed their attack to the exact moment they thought you'd be weakest. They rehearsed their lines, polished their accusations, synchronized their betrayal like a military operation. And then the moment arrived. The trap was set. The dominoes were lined up. The fuse was lit. And they watched, hearts pounding, palms sweating, eyes wide with anticipation, waiting for the explosion that would finally end you. But instead of an explosion, there was silence. A terrifying, soul-shaking silence. Because you didn't react the way they expected. You didn't panic. You didn't plead. You didn't scramble for explanations or beg for mercy. You just looked at them. That look, that one single, unshakable, all-knowing look that told them everything they needed to fear. You already knew. You'd already seen it. Every thread, every lie, every carefully woven deception. You'd already unraveled it in your mind weeks ago. And in 6 seconds, you said the one thing, did the one thing, revealed the one truth that made their entire house of cards collapse into dust. 6 months of effort, gone in 6 seconds. And the look on their faces? That wasn't just shock. That was the death of every assumption they ever held about you. That was the collapse of every version of you they'd invented in their heads to justify their obsession. Now let's get into the psychology of why they failed, because this is where it gets delicious. They failed because they planned for the person you used to be. They built their trap based on outdated intelligence. They studied the old you, the version that used to react, the version that used to explain, the version that used to show its hand when pressured. But that version doesn't exist anymore. That version died, quietly, privately, somewhere in the middle of the suffering they caused you. And what replaced it, what rose from those ashes, is something they have no framework to understand. You became unpredictable by becoming grounded. You became untouchable by becoming still. You became unreadable by becoming transparent. They couldn't see you coming because you weren't coming. You were already there. You'd already arrived at the conclusion before they even started the argument. You'd already solved the equation before they finished writing the problem. And that's the thing about people who evolve through pain. They don't just heal, they upgrade. They develop a perception so sharp, so refined, so ruthlessly accurate that they can feel a lie before it's spoken, sense a trap before it's set, and see through a mask before it's even fully worn. Here's what they'll never admit, not to you, not to each other, not even to themselves, in the dark at 3 a.m. when the truth comes crawling. They underestimated you because they needed to. They had to believe you were less than what you are, because the alternative was too terrifying. If they admitted you were smarter, sharper, more aware than them, then they'd have to face the reality that they were outmatched from the start. That every whisper, every plot, every scheme was nothing more than mice building a trap for a lion. And who wants to live with that knowledge? Who wants to admit they spent 6 months of their one precious life trying to destroy someone who could dismantle them in 6 seconds? That's not just embarrassing. That's existentially devastating. That's the kind of realization that rewires your brain, that makes you question every decision you've ever made, every alliance you've ever formed, every judgment call you thought was genius, but was actually just ego wearing a costume of strategy. They didn't just lose a battle. They lost the war they didn't even know they'd already lost before firing the first shot. And the generals of that war are now deserters hiding from their own army. Now let's talk about what's happening to them right now, in this very moment, as they sit in the aftermath of their spectacular failure. Because the explosion happened, but the fallout is just beginning. See, when a plan that took 6 months to build gets destroyed in 6 seconds, the collapse doesn't stop at the plan itself. It spreads, it infects, it contaminates everything it touches. Their confidence, shattered. Their alliances, fractured. Because the people they conspired with, the people they convinced to join their little crusade, those people are now looking at them differently. Not with admiration, not with solidarity, with suspicion, with embarrassment, with the quiet, dawning realization that they hitched their wagon to a fool. And that's the beautiful thing about failed conspiracies. They don't just fail for the ringleader, they fail for everyone involved. Every person who participated in that 6-month plot is now carrying the stain of that failure. Every person who whispered in those group chats is now wondering if you know their name, if you've seen their messages, if you've already filed their betrayal away in that terrifyingly accurate memory of yours. But it gets worse for them. Oh, so much worse. Because they didn't just lose credibility with bystanders. They lost credibility with each other. The alliance they built, the coalition of whispers, the brotherhood of betrayal, it's fracturing, right now, in real time. Because every co-conspirator is looking at the ringleader and thinking, you told me this would work. You told me they wouldn't see it coming. You told me we were smarter, more prepared, more strategic. And they dismantled us in 6 seconds. 6 seconds. Trust within a conspiracy is a fragile thing. It's held together by confidence, by the shared belief that the plan is bulletproof. But when that belief shatters, when the plan doesn't just fail but fails spectacularly, catastrophically, embarrassingly, the trust goes with it. And now they're turning on each other, blaming each other, questioning each other, wondering who the weak link was, wondering who talked, wondering who slipped up. But the truth, the devastating truth they can't face, is that none of them slipped up. The plan was executed perfectly. It was the target they misjudged. It was you they underestimated. And that's a pill none of them can swallow, because it means their failure wasn't tactical. It was fundamental, built into the foundation of their arrogance from day one. And here's the part that will keep them up at night for years. They don't know how much you know. They don't know if you saw just the surface or if you saw everything, the depth, the details, the names, the dates, the exact words used, the exact moment each of them chose to participate. They're sitting in a fog of uncertainty, and that fog is more punishing than any retaliation you could ever deliver. Because retaliation has an end. Revenge has a conclusion. A response has a period at the end of the sentence. But uncertainty? Uncertainty is a sentence with no ending. It's a door that never closes. It's a question that never gets answered. And you, by saying so little, by revealing just enough to destroy their plan, but not enough to reveal the full extent of your knowledge, you've trapped them in the worst prison imaginable. A prison of their own paranoia. A prison where every glance you give them could mean everything or nothing. Where every word you say could be loaded or empty. Where every silence could be forgiveness or strategy. And they'll never know, because you'll never tell them. And that is power they can't comprehend. That is dominance they can't fight. That is a level of psychological mastery that makes their 6 months of plotting look like children drawing battle plans in crayon. Let's talk about what happened after those 6 seconds. Because the aftermath is almost more devastating than the moment itself. You didn't gloat, you didn't celebrate, you didn't stand over their wreckage and deliver a victory speech. You just went quiet. And that silence, that beautiful, terrifying, soul-crushing silence, became the loudest thing in their universe. Because they expected a reaction. They expected anger, confrontation, accusations, a dramatic showdown where they could at least play the victim, at least twist the narrative, at least find some angle to exploit. But you gave them nothing. Nothing but silence. And silence, when wielded by someone who just demonstrated total dominance, is the most psychologically destructive weapon in existence. It says, I don't need to explain. It says, I don't need to prove anything. It says, you're not worth the energy of a response. And for people who spent 6 months trying to provoke a reaction, that silence is unbearable. It's water torture on the soul. It's a mirror with no frame, just their reflection staring back with nowhere to hide. And that silence will follow them for years, echoing louder with every passing day. That silence is doing things to them that no confrontation ever could. In the absence of your response, they're filling the void with their own demons. They're replaying those 6 seconds on an endless loop. They're analyzing every word you said, every look you gave, every micro-expression they think they caught. They're constructing theories about what you know, what you'll do next, whether the other shoe is about to drop. And every single theory is worse than the last. Because human imagination, when fueled by guilt and fear, is the cruelest storyteller alive. They're writing horror stories about themselves in their own heads. They're creating consequences that don't even exist yet, punishments you haven't delivered, revelations you haven't made, and you're doing none of it. You're just living your life. Moving forward. Building. Creating. Existing in a state of peace that they perceive as power. And maybe it is power, because peace in the face of betrayal is the most powerful thing a human being can possess. They wanted a war. You gave them a void. And voids are far more terrifying than battles, because in a battle, at least you know what you're fighting. In a void, you're fighting yourself. And they are losing that fight, spectacularly, without you lifting a single finger. Let's talk about you for a moment. Let's talk about how you became this person. This terrifyingly perceptive, devastatingly calm, impossibly aware version of yourself that just dismantled 6 months of scheming in 6 seconds. Because you weren't always like this. There was a time when their plots would have worked. There was a time when you would have walked right into the trap, eyes wide, heart open, trusting the wrong smiles, believing the wrong words. And they know that. That's exactly why they tried it again. They remembered the old you, the one who fell, the one who broke, the one who didn't see it coming last time. But what they failed to calculate, what they were too arrogant, too lazy, too consumed by their own narrative to notice, was that every single time you fell, you didn't just get back up. You rebuilt yourself with better materials, stronger foundations, sharper instincts. You turned every wound into a lesson, every betrayal into a blueprint, every scar into a sensor that could detect danger from miles away. They created the very weapon that destroyed them. Their cruelty was your training ground. Their deception was your classroom. Their plotting was your curriculum. And you graduated with honors while they were still stuck on the first page of a test they wrote themselves. You see, pain is either a prison or a university, and you chose to learn. You chose to study every single person who ever hurt you, not to hurt them back, but to understand the mechanics of betrayal. You learned how liars construct their stories, how manipulators sequence their moves, how schemers build their coalitions. You became a student of the dark side of human nature, not because you wanted to become dark, but because you refused to ever be caught in the dark again. And that education, that brutal, unforgiving, paid-in-blood education, is what gave you those 6 seconds. Those 6 seconds weren't luck. They weren't instinct. They weren't a guess. They were the culmination of every tear you cried in private, every night you couldn't sleep, every moment you sat in silence trying to figure out where it went wrong. All of that pain, all of that analysis, all of that quiet, relentless self-improvement compressed into one single moment of devastating clarity. You didn't just see their trap. You saw the architects, the engineers, the motivations, the insecurities driving them, the ego fueling them, the fear rotting them from the inside. You saw the entire machine, and you knew exactly which bolt to remove to make it all collapse. 6 seconds. That's all it took. Because you'd been preparing for this moment your entire life without even knowing it. Now let's discuss what they actually lost, because it goes far beyond a failed plan. They lost credibility permanently. Every person who watched them fail, every person who saw their 6-month masterpiece crumble in your hands like tissue paper, every person who was supposed to celebrate their victory and instead witnessed their humiliation, those people will never look at them the same way again. And here's why that matters. In the game of social dynamics, credibility isn't just valuable, it's everything. Once people see that your judgment is flawed, once they see that your calculations were wrong, once they see that the person you painted as weak and vulnerable just outmaneuvered you without breaking a sweat, they don't just lose respect for your intelligence, they lose trust in your character. Because now they're thinking, if they were this wrong about that person, what else are they wrong about? If they spent 6 months on this and still failed, how competent are they really? If the person they targeted could see through them this easily, what does that say about the quality of their thinking? Those questions are now living rent-free in the minds of everyone who watched. And those questions will never leave. They'll multiply. They'll spread. They'll infect every future interaction your haters have with anyone who witnessed their spectacular collapse. Here's the tragedy in all of this. And yes, there is a tragedy, but it's not yours. The tragedy belongs to them. Because they had 6 months, 6 entire months, 180 days, 4,320 hours. And they could have used that time for anything. They could have healed their own wounds. They could have built their own dreams. They could have invested in their own growth, their own peace, their own future, but instead, they chose to invest every ounce of that time, energy, and focus into destroying you. And what did they get in return? Nothing. Worse than nothing. They got exposed. They got humiliated. They got psychologically dismantled by the very person they tried to dismantle. 6 months of their life gone, poured into a project that returned nothing but shame and paranoia. And you, during those same 6 months, what were you doing? You were growing, you were building. You were becoming the version of yourself that could detect their plot and destroy it before they even finished explaining it to their co-conspirators. That's the ultimate irony. While they were investing in your destruction, you were investing in your evolution. While they were getting weaker, more paranoid, more consumed by bitterness, you were getting stronger, sharper, more grounded, more aware. They spent 6 months going backward. You spent 6 months going forward. And when those two timelines collided, the result was never in question. And the worst part for them, the thing that will haunt them until their final breath, is that they can't even learn from this. Because learning from this would require them to admit something they'll never be able to admit. It would require them to say, I was wrong. I was outmatched. I was playing a game I couldn't win against a person I couldn't read. And their ego, that bloated, fragile, house of cards ego that drove them to plot in the first place, won't allow that admission. So instead, they'll rationalize. They'll tell themselves, you got lucky. They'll tell themselves someone tipped you off. They'll tell themselves the plan was good but the timing was off. They'll construct elaborate excuses that protect their self-image while ignoring the obvious truth. And that truth is simple, brutal, unavoidable. You were better, not louder, not flashier, not more aggressive, just better. Better at reading people, better at understanding motives, better at staying calm under pressure, better at turning pain into perception and suffering into strategy. And they'll never reach that level because they're too busy plotting against people who've already surpassed them to ever do the work required to grow.